So thank you, everybody. SkyInclude interview series. We a lot of times just me on the mic, showing my screen as I learn. But I'm really happy. Like Matt, I think this is our first one-on-one. Of course we talk a lot in online on Telegram and Discord and other channels. You're fundamentally very helpful in the community as in developer community at Handshake and doing great things at the development at Impervious. Also had a great session, a couple sessions at the HandyCon. Thanks for coming on,
Yeah,
Matt.
thanks for having me. I think this is going to be a great talk.
Yeah, I feel like, just give some people some background. I mean, there's so many. Maybe we'll do this regularly. I mean, I think you're willing, which would be great, maybe to do more of these. But this is the first one. Me as just like SkyInclude, I started this channel. Like I kind of just like to kind of ask, learn, and share as I go. So I think we'll always be learning, but this topic is really, I think it started, there's become more and more decisions we need to make as a community. And, I've joined a lot of different kind of like monthly calls. I've joined, of course, we've done some events. We have all these Discords and Telegram groups, but I know there's a GitHub, but I think hopefully others will get value. But I definitely for myself want to like ask you some questions like how do we make these decisions? There's like soft fork discussions. There's like, Brave or integration issues. There's some even stuff I would like to propose. So that's kind of the agenda today. So do you want to start about like some more high level points?
Yeah, great. Sounds good. I just want to say thank you for all the work that you do. Your videos are great. Everyone loves them. You've got a video for all the most frequently asked questions. People ask about unstoppable domains or how to use Bob Wallet, and you're like always on the cutting edge. Whenever Bob releases a new version with a new feature, you're like, I'm doing a video about this tonight. Before anyone else has downloaded the software, there's already a SkyInclude video. And I think we chatted before, or I'd known about you a little bit or seen your name somewhere, but definitely my first like, oh wow, Mike's awesome is like, you made a video about a video I made. And I'm like, somebody watched a video I made that was like too technical and remade the video for their audience, and like that's awesson. So
I was almost
really
afraid
appreciate
what I mean, it was great content, but I just wanted to say it from a more marketer business person, not technical.
Yeah, exactly. And as you know, Handshake has no marketing department. So the fact that you have marketing experience, you know how to talk to people, and in particular people that maybe aren't developers or have limited developer experience or are developers, but just how to communicate. So obviously your role in the community is super important. So we're going to talk about governance today. So governance is a huge word, it's a huge topic, and I just think in general, like governance means you have a community, right? There's a group of people, and you want the government, let's call it, to be a feedback loop, so that the community has some ideas about what they want the community to be, and those ideas maybe, I don't know, I'm just kind of improvising here, that those ideas go up to the government makes them real or enforces them somehow, and they come back down to the community by being enforced. Government also like represents the community in interactions with other groups, with other governments, or with other communities. And I think, so there's like there's community aspect, and there's like, we can talk about law enforcement, obviously, like when it comes to blockchains, we'd be talking about the protocol rules there. And also some standards when it comes to technical stuff. There's always like a million ways to do things. And if you want, standards are important so that we can all interoperate. I mean, DNS is a standard. It was invented as a draft, and some people are like, hey, what if we send messages with these bytes and these orders? And once you have a standard, then anybody can write a computer program that follows that standard. And then we can communicate. If someone's like, hey, I want to do DNS, but I want to put the bytes in this order. Well, like, that's great, but without the standard, you're going to have problems communicating those messages to other people. And the blockchain rules itself are a standard. Unfortunately, it's difficult to document because there are so many subtleties in the actual code. But like Bitcoin, the JavaScript Bitcoin library that JJ wrote is compatible with Bitcoin Core, and he had to do that by looking at Bitcoin Core and C++ and rewriting those ideas in JavaScript because there was a lack of like a documented standard. But there's a set of rules there in Bitcoin Core, and JJ was able to copy those in JavaScript, and so with the standard we can all interoperate. So I think what we want to talk about is like, how do those standards get standardized? And what if we want to change a standard that already exists? What if we want to change a blockchain protocol rule that already exists? And then on the community level, there's also like Handshake, a brand. I mean, it's a decentralized community, but like it's got a logo, it's got a name, it's got a website, it has a purpose. Like that's a brand, and you know, it represents all of us who use it, and so right. So there's a lot of stuff to start talking about. I think maybe we can kind of talk about like a little bit of the history and who the people are, because that's another thing. Okay, that's another question I like left off the table, is like, who gets to decide, you know, if there's a if the vote comes out 50-50, like what do we do? Exactly. You know, so there are the founders: Andrew Lee, Joseph Poon, Christopher Joseph, JJ. They wrote the white paper, they collected the $10 million, they decided what the protocol rules were going to be, they wrote the first version of the software, they made the website, and you know, they are still alive. They like to, I feel like they launched Handshake intentionally with no foundation to force it to be a community effort, and I'm very grateful for that. But we still kind of need them. Like handshake.org is a domain that is owned by the founders, you know? So if the community wants to change something about handshake.org, like there is a gatekeeper involved. And also, you know, when it comes to like the NPM package, so this is maybe a little technical, but I'll just say like, when it comes to JavaScript, there's a website called NPM, and everybody puts their JavaScript packages there. And the only person who can put the Handshake package there is JJ. So if he were to get hit by a bus, God forbid, there would be no way to update that without, you know, a long conversation with them. Wow. And similarly, the HSD code base, the actual code that runs the full node, JJ is the owner of that code repository, and he's delegated authority to me and to a few others who are sort of inactive, but they still technically have permission. So when it comes to HSD, like I am one of the people that can change the code base there. So that's you know, important. These are sort of points of centralization, but it's also important to note right off the bat, like you don't need to run HSD. You don't need to download the version that's on NPM. Namebase, for example, runs their own version of HSD. They've made their own modifications. Some of those modifications, I wish they would contribute back to the Handshake org HSD. They don't, that's okay. But right off the bat, it's important to note that like, even if JJ and me and everyone else who can merge to the official repo were disposed somehow, nothing can stop the code. And also, if you disagree with anything that's happening in the protocol in that repository, nothing can stop you from running a different version of the code. And that is totally important when it comes down to how do I participate? You can run a full node, and you can run a different full node than me. But like I said earlier about the DNS stuff, or like just protocol in general, there are certain things you can't change, or we're not going to be able to interoperate. So at some point, you know, everybody in the community who's running the software needs to sort of agree on a certain set of things.
Interesting about the, I hope you can maybe help me clarify running different HSDs. So that means they're running, like Namebase has their own node that they're running that they've modified, but that still runs off the protocol, right? I mean, of the blockchain.
Right. So, okay. So in Handshake, we don't really have any alternative implementations yet, the way that Bitcoin does, just because it's still so new. There might be some in the works in other languages, but if you look at Bitcoin Core written in C++ and Bcoin written in JavaScript, these two applications are, for all intents and purposes, completely different. They have different features. They're written in different languages. They have different contributors, different performance characteristics. People can choose to install one or the other, just like I can use Chrome, you can use Firefox, but we can both browse the web, right? But there are certain things that have to be agreed on, namely like the hard rules of the protocol. So I can use Chrome, you can use Firefox, but both those applications need to show us basically the same website. Otherwise, like they're not doing us any good, you know? In my security talks, I usually talk about email. There's lots of different email clients, but like when you send an email message, it has to have a from and a to. Otherwise, you're just not doing email. You're doing something else. So there are hard, yeah, okay. And so there are hard rules about the protocol. For example, let's talk about some rules that you cannot break in Handshake, even if you were to run a completely different computer program. The signatures have to be cryptographically valid. You know, the money supply is a rule. You can't generate money out of thin air. Some people are allowed to. They're called miners, or the airdrop, or the reserve names. You can't change those rules. Or let's say you can, but everybody has to agree. But we'll get there. So these are the hard protocol rules. You have to agree on at least to connect. You know, what else? Like the auction winner pays the second highest bid. You know, that's something that, like, if you don't want to use the HSD, if you don't want to use the Handshake full node that JJ and I contribute to, you're welcome to do whatever you want. But like, you're going to have to follow that rule. Otherwise, you're just not going to be on the same blockchain. You're going to be on a different blockchain. You're going to have a different DNS root zone. Which, by the way, so like, you know, blockchains have got all kinds of disputes, and Bitcoin split into Bitcoin Cash. Bitcoin Cash split several more times. Every time that happens, like, the blockchain is basically duplicated and then forked. And now there's new coins and a new blockchain, and people who had the first coin, now they got to say all this kind of crazy stuff. With Handshake, it may happen that like we have a fork, or there's like a dispute in the community that's so big it splits the community in half, and then we get a second Handshake blockchain. That would also mean there's a second Handshake DNS root zone, and you know, that's tough. And like, we talk a lot in this space about having an alternative root zone to ICANN and how there's going to be name conflicts there and stuff like that. So we have to be open to the fact that people can decide what DNS root zone they want to use. But honestly, if there's like multiple Handshake root zones, it's going to get real messy, especially if there's names on one blockchain that don't get updated on the other. And
yeah. I don't think anybody that I know wants to do that. I mean, we all want to be on the same root. I've wrote root. So let's like, yeah, I mean, there's also hard forks and soft forks. I don't know, maybe that's probably a whole different discussion probably, but assuming we all agree, right? Even a hard fork could be, if we don't, even if we all agree to hard fork, that's because it's changing something that can't be changed in the current state.
Right. So protocol rules can be changed. There's a couple ways to do it. Well, first of all, let's talk about changing code in ways that doesn't affect everybody. So for example, like, let me think of one, like we want to add a feature to the wallet where you could send multiple bids, or you send bids in a different way, or let's see, if you want, like, I'm trying to think of some wallet features that we've added. Like if you want to add a feature to the code, like to be able to sign message with name, which is something
we did
about. You don't need to add that to every version of HSD. That's a feature. It's basically an application level. It's like it's a bell or a whistle, right? If you're going to run your own Handshake software, you don't need that. Maybe there'll be a protocol in the future where people require you to sign a message with your name.
Yep.
We can get to that. But I just want to say, like, you can change the code without everybody having to change their code. Like, there's things up here that don't really matter on the protocol level. Okay. When it comes to the protocol rules, things like I mentioned, like the size of blocks, or the fact that the auction winner pays the second highest bid, or that signatures have to verify cryptographically or something like that. These are much harder to change. And you mentioned hard forks and soft forks. This gets technical, but I have a metaphor that I love to use that I stole from Andreas Antonopoulos, who's a Bitcoin, great Bitcoin explainer. Right. And so he talks about a restaurant that serves vegetarian and vegan food. So let's say I have a restaurant and I serve everything. I serve cheeseburgers, I serve milkshakes, I serve salads. Omnivores can eat there. Vegetarians, let's say I only serve one thing. It gets a little difficult. If I only serve cheeseburgers, only omnivores can eat there, right? Vegetarians can eat that, vegans can't eat that. If I say, okay, I'm not going to serve burgers anymore, I'm going to serve milkshakes. Now omnivores and vegetarians can come. And if I say I'm not going to serve milkshakes, I'm going to serve salads, now omnivores, vegetarians, and vegans can come. So what I've done there is I've expanded the rules. I've made the rules more flexible. I've included more valid things. That's actually a hard fork. So back in March, we discovered an inflation bug. Okay, there was a hole in the protocol rules that would allow an attacker to generate way more coins than we would want them to. And we let miners generate coins, we let the airdrop generate coins, we let reserve name claims generate coins. What we don't want is somebody to generate coins outside of that. That's, you could call it part of the social contract. It's sort of in the white paper. We want Handshake to be deflationary. It's sort of an expected community rule that that you can't just generate coins out of thin air. And it turns out there was a problem in the protocol that would allow that. So this is a really bad situation because we have to, and when I say we, I'm just going to talk about me and JJ and a few other very small group of people that were involved in like looking at the problem, discussing solutions, and deploying those solutions. That's what I mean by we right now. So there's a bit of governance for you right there.
Cool.
People who find security problems should please disclose them privately with an encrypted email to JJ, ideally, or you can send it to me and I can connect with JJ if I can't figure it out myself. And this is a widely like spread internet kind of thing. Bitcoin has like, if you find a problem in Bitcoin, email Peter Willa. Here's his key to encrypt the message. So it could have come from anyone. It just happened to come from me because I was studying this part of the code on this particular day, and I realized, crap, we got to fix this. So I reached out to JJ privately. The reason I don't go into the dev chat and be like, oh my God, guys, I found this huge hole in Handshake is because right off the bat, people can start generating money, and then it's a real problem, So when it comes to security issues, it sucks. We kind of have to break the community governance rules. I have to keep secrets from you. I have to keep secrets from my friends in the other developers, just because like that's just, we have to be safe about it, And so what we were able to do in this case is fix the protocol with a soft fork. That means that only the miners need to change the rules. And basically what we're doing is we are writing code just for the miners so that the miners censor transactions intentionally. We're basically creating a 51% attack to censor a certain type of transaction, which would be undesirable, And so that's what happened that week that we were kind of radio silent is we went back and forth. We came up with a bunch of different ways to solve it. We figured out the best way with the least amount of trade-offs, and we sent that code directly to the miners, and they deployed it, and we monitored them basically in secret to make sure that the code was being deployed correctly. And when we felt that the miners were all enforcing the rules, then we could come out with the public disclosure, which we did as soon as possible. And then we needed everybody to upgrade their HSD. Namebase had to update, Bop Wallet had to update, and that all happened very quickly as well. Because the most important thing is that the miners censor the transactions, but then everybody who runs a full node also needs to be on the same rule set to protect us from the miners, to make sure that the miners don't cheat and break the rules, or maybe they undo the code we sent so that they can inflate the money supply. That's why we need the full nodes. So it's hard because we needed the miners to upgrade, and once they were upgraded, then we knew the network was safe, but then we needed to upgrade the network to keep the network safe from the miners. And everything is calm. So talking about governance, like that was a soft fork. A soft fork is when you ask the miners basically to tighten the rules, and it basically appears as censorship to people who are trying to break those rules. And we could talk about how this works in Bitcoin and stuff like that. And there are certain rules you can do this way. So for example, if we wanted to tighten the block size, right now Handshake blocks can be a maximum of, basically let's just call it 1 megabyte. If we wanted to change that to 500 kilobytes, that would be a soft fork. We could do that. We just tell the miners to censor any blocks that are bigger than a certain size. And nobody, people who try to send blocks that are too big, they get censored, but they're still on the same network. There's no hard fork. They can still transact, and they're just like, that's weird. These messages are getting censored, but that's okay. I can still do everything else.
Got it.
A hard fork is when somebody running a full node thinks you are breaking a rule. So if all the full nodes have a rule that blocks are 1 megabyte, and someone sends a 2 megabyte block, that breaks the rule. That block is just invalid, and that's a hard fork because you're invalid. So you're not part of my system. You're part of a different system with a different rule set. And there's no way to like, does that make sense? Like you can't soft fork the block size higher, because that would be breaking a rule. There's all these computer programs out there that say if the number is bigger than 1, it's invalid.
Yeah, you can only censor, you can't expand.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it. So what kind of things require a hard fork in Handshake? Or also, so let's categorize soft fork, hard fork. If we wanted to stop the airdrop, that's basically a type of censorship. That's a soft fork. People could still try to, they could run old Handshake software and try to send airdrops, but they just would never get mined. They'd never get confirmed. And if enough people running full nodes agree to that rule, those transactions wouldn't even get relayed across the network. That's a soft fork. Let's say we wanted to change the proof of work algorithm, which is, I have an anecdote about this, like kind of the early days of mainnet. Somebody came in the developer channel and they're like, this algorithm is no good. We want to change it. And after a few weeks of talking with this person, it sort of became clear that they either had an interest in GPU mining, or they were an ASIC manufacturer themselves who was basically just late. The Handshake proof of work algorithm was decided for mainnet, I think like in August, the year before we launched. It had actually gone through a couple iterations, but the one that we're using today was decided like in the summer of testnet before mainnet launched. And if you're an ASIC manufacturer, you could have started on that day with your research and development. And it's possible that's what Goldshell did. I'm not sure when Goldshell decided they were going to start investing. That was a risk because we could have changed the algorithm again before mainnet. We didn't. So whenever somewhere in there before mainnet, Goldshell started working on their product. And I have a feeling like this person in the Telegram channel who was telling us we needed to change the algorithm was just late to that game and wanted us to start it over and like have a proof of work change that would, so that's a hard fork. There's no, actually, they had this guy, this is tough. He had an idea to soft fork the proof of work algorithm. Boy, that's tough. This is tough. Let me think of maybe well, I'll just continue with the story. He had an idea to change the proof of work algorithm, and it's the kind of thing where like he didn't convince me that it was something that we needed to do, and he didn't convince the community. And so here's where it comes back to like the gatekeepers and the Handshake organization and HSD is like, if I look at something and I'm like, this, I just don't want to make this a priority. It doesn't mean that you can't. Like if this guy had enough community support to change the proof of work algorithm, he could have written the code and convinced people to change their software. And similarly, like there's a community member who thinks that the reserved names were handled improperly and that additional names need to be reserved and handed to people that acquired those names on the ICANN route after mainnet launched. And that's just, that would be a hard fork actually to assign new reserved names. That list is really, really a hard rule. And like, there's just not enough community support to do that. And so I'm looking at that and I'm like, this is not a priority for me. I'm fixing wallet bugs and doing other stuff. It's simply not a priority, but it doesn't mean that community member can't write the code himself or get someone else to write that code and convince other people to run the node and change the rules of the protocol. If you can convince enough people to run your version of the software, then you can influence the protocol. It just so happens that we have this like vibe of centralization, which is like, that the code that JJ writes is like what everybody has to run, but that's not necessarily true.
Got it. Okay.
Was that too messy? Hard soft fork?
No, I get it. I mean, what I'm simplifying in my mind is like taking away, well, I'm not censoring or blocking transactions. Filtering transactions is soft, but something that changes the size. But I know that the reserved name list can't be soft forked though, right?
Right.
That has to be hard fork. So, but that's not censoring transactions.
Right. So let's look at the reserved name list. If we wanted to remove names from the reserved name list, it would have to be names that have not yet been claimed, Like, let's say we look at COM. We're like, we want to take the word COM off the reserved name list. We can do that with a soft fork. What would happen is the miners would censor anybody who tried to claim the word COM, and it would just be a soft fork. Nobody would really have to upgrade their software, just a majority of the miners to censor any claim made by COM. If we wanted to add a name to the reserved name list, let's say .music. Let's say .music was never auctioned on Handshake, and a year goes by and we're like, oh, the name .music is still available on Handshake, but we really should be reserved. So we want to add a name to the reserved name list. That's a hard fork because there's already hundreds of Handshake nodes out there. And to them, music is not a reserved name. So if they see a claim for the name music, that's just invalid. It's like not part of my system. It's part of some other system. It's illegal. If the Handshake community decided that we wanted to add the name music to the reserved name list, everybody who runs Handshake software would have to agree and upgrade their software to allow that. That's a hard rule to break.
So
that's a hard fork.
Because it's like expanding, it's adding something, not taking something away. It's back. Right. It's kind of like reverse censor, but it's adding something to be adding something to be blocked, but that's adding it. So that's a hard fork. Right. So yeah. Okay. Yeah, thanks.
Sure. I'm trying to think of like if we look at football. If we say, okay, from now on in football, you can never run the ball. You always have to pass. Like that's not a hard fork. Like people who don't even know about that new rule they'll think that you're still they think that you're still playing the game. Like, oh, the 49ers for some reason they don't run the ball anymore. All they do is pass. Like that's okay. Like you've making the rule set smaller. But if you were to say, okay, now you're allowed to kick the ball whenever you want, like that breaks the game. You're gonna look at that and be like, that's not football. They're playing something else. You're only allowed to kick the ball under certain circumstances.
Got it. Okay, I think maybe we could do another video in the future about this more deep. But I think back to the I think I'm ready to talk about HIP. I mean, there's always these IP like EIP, Ethereum.
Right.
In a something improvement proposal, right? IP is improvement, so it's Handshake improvement proposal, right? HIP. And then a lot of blockchains all seem to always have this IP, which means it's like an improvement proposal. And that's how changes are proposed to the community to be discussed.
Right. So that's great. So now we've talked about hard and soft forks and governance and roles that the Handshake org repo plays and what types of software you can run. You don't have to run the same type of software as everybody else. You do have to follow certain rules, all that kind of stuff. I think we've covered that, which is good. So now let's talk about how you actually change a rule, or like if Mike Michelini has an idea, or if anybody from the community has an idea and they actually want to change a rule about the protocol. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I will share this screen. Can you see, I'm looking at the BIPs. This is the Bitcoin Improvement Proposal repo. They've been around a long time. It's very large. BIPs were actually based on, I think, the Python improvement proposals, which are called PIPs or PEPs. Anyway, Bitcoin has set out this governance model where people can propose an idea and it can get merged into this repo with enough developer community support. And just because something gets merged or assigned a BIP number doesn't necessarily mean that it's a protocol rule. It just means like we've given this a number, a name, and we've agreed on certain specifics about it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that all software has to follow it. So things like Taproot, segregated witness are in here, address types. There's a lot of things in here that Bitcoin doesn't do, for example, but could. Okay. The way that BIPs get started in the Bitcoin world is they actually start here on the Bitcoin mailing list. This is something that's obviously open. Anybody can subscribe to it. I have it delivered to my email box every couple of days. And you can see people are discussing these ideas. Check SIG from stack. So this is an idea that's a protocol improvement that is not even a BIP yet. It's not even an improvement proposal. What it is an idea. And the people who propose the idea are trying to see if anyone else thinks it's a good enough idea to basically do the work to make, an improvement proposal. And a lot of times people will come onto the mailing list out of nowhere and they'll be like, I think we should change to proof of stake. and I want a BIP number to change Bitcoin to proof of stake. And everyone kind of rolls their eyes and they're like, this has been discussed forever. Like, we're not going to give you a BIP number for this. Stop working on this idea. It's a dead end, you know? So in Handshake, we don't really have a mailing list. The community is simply too small. We have a number of developer channels, and there are other ways to start discussions if you have an idea, but you haven't made, you don't want to make an improvement proposal yet. So let's take a look at the Handshake improvement proposals. Fauci has done great work cleaning up this website and making it accessible and making it look great. And you can find it at hsd-dev.org/HIPs. And this is, you know, kind of the front end for it. And we can look at some proposals that already have been merged. These have been, you know, discussed by developers, and I'll show you how and where, and have been assigned a number. Some of these are not done yet, indicated by the word draft. Some of these we're already using, like HIP1 is already being used in ShakeDex.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Right, and we mentioned wallet addresses earlier, and you know, Fauci has an idea about that called HIP2. So where these come into play is like, and none of these are actually protocol changes yet. We haven't actually had anybody propose a Handshake improvement proposal that would change the way HSD works or change the way that all Handshake software needs to work. I do have some ideas for this that can optimize the network, and we'll get to that. We'll get to that later. These are all basically application level standards. So for non-interactive name swaps, this was an idea started by Mark Tyneway and then built out by myself and Kurumi Amari and a few other developers. But basically back, you know, before mainnet launched, Mark Tyneway had this idea that you can swap a name for a payment atomically, and we could do it in this cool way. And so he wrote up this specification on how it can be done, given the protocol rules that we have. So if you want to sell a name for Handshake, do you have to do it this way? No. The fact that we have a standard is cool because it means like ShakeDex can look at this standard and be like, I'm going to implement that. And that's exactly what happened. It was actually kind of insane. Like, we had this HIP published and the specification written, and Kurumi Amari came in and was like, I'm just going to make this. And I mean, that is like, that's awesome. That's what we want to see. You know, this is like some people have ideas, other people build it. Like, that is super cool. And the fact that it's standardized means anybody can make a ShakeDex and add their own features. And the ShakeDex auctions can be interoperable with, you know, whatever. If Flamingo Handshake, for example, wanted to adopt this, they could. And it could be compatible with ShakeDex, and people can post their auctions on both platforms, or, you know, pick one at ShakeDex and Flamingo Handshake could compete, you know, that kind of thing. So that's why it's important to have these standards. Awesome. If you want to propose, let's see, if you want to propose an HIP, this is the repository for the HIPs. Let's see, I'll go back here. So this is like the code for the website I just showed you. Yeah. And you can see there's some pull requests. Anybody can open a pull request. Here is a HIP that I've started that has not been merged yet because it's not done. We're still working out some details. But this is, you know, my decentralized, Dane for decentralized naming systems idea that myself and Buffer are working on. The idea is to make a limited version of Dane that we can get browsers to adopt. So as we're working on this, you know, here Brandon Dees has offered a comment, and people can discuss this. So they can look at this proposal and be like, I don't like this idea. Let's do it a little bit differently. And we can have the discussion here on GitHub, or, you know, in any channel like the developer Telegram channel. And once we're all happy with it, then we can merge this, and then we have a standard, and then people like Brave, Firefox, Chrome, Puma, Handy Browser, whatever, can be like, this is a great standard, we're gonna adopt it. There's a lot of interesting features on GitHub. If you're new to GitHub, if you have an idea for Handshake, but you're not a developer, you still want to propose something, this is not really a terrible place to do it. You can open an issue. An issue is a comment, or like, here, you know, I've said this is something we need to fix. And I'm not offering any code. I'm just basically saying, like, there's a problem, there's an issue, you know? So if you have an idea, you can be like, hey, why don't we have a HIP that explains wallet naming? You know, go ahead and open an issue, and we can have a discussion. We can also have an actual discussion on GitHub. Some community members have talked about, this is a great example, like, we wanted some type of signaling mechanism so that if I own a name and I want everybody to know that it's for sale, like, how do I do that? And this would include shake decks and all the other auction systems, or maybe you don't want to do a shake deck style auction. You just want to sell the name directly to somebody. So we're trying to figure out the best way to do this. And I forget this guy's actual name, Peter. So Peter started this idea. Fauci made some comments. I made some comments. I don't think there's anybody else on this thread, but we're trying to have a discussion on what is the best way for a name owner to signal that they want to sell their name. Ideally, this conversation bears fruit, and the community says, like, okay, we figured it out. We want to do a special transaction type or a certain text record with this format, and then we can go write an HIP from here. So, ideas can come from anywhere. I think Peter is actually a developer. He understands some technical issues, but you don't have to be a developer to ask a question or to have an idea. Just, come in a Telegram channel and ask something, or start a discussion here on the HIPS GitHub page, and people can help, put it together, bring it to fruition. If they think it's a bad idea, don't be hurt. Maybe you can find other people who think it's a good idea. They can write the code for it. You can have an alternative full node. And like I said, like, there's no, the gatekeepers are an illusion,
Got it. That's cool. Thanks for this. This has really been helpful. So yeah, so I think, so once it's approved, like, it has to be, somebody has to do it, right? Or I mean, it's approved. Well, I mean, what is approved actually? What is consensus or voting, or how does, how
Right.
do we confirm that enough people want this?
Yeah.
Do it.
That's, incredibly hard, especially because we have there's a small community, and there's an even smaller community of developers. And I can even show you, like, this is github.com/handshake-org. This is where the HIPs are. This is where HSD is. This is where the documentation for the full node is, the handshake.org website, the ledger code, airdrop code, Urkel code. This is like the, this is where everything is at. If you have a problem with any piece of Handshake software, it's likely in here. So, we can take a look at HSD. And so, for example, really quick, I can show you Namebase HQ. This is Namebase's version of HSD. Okay, they have different, some things in here are different 36 commits behind. So they've added stuff to their version of HSD that is not, for example, in my version of HSD. This commit updated document reference to git clone. I don't know what that is. That's not in the version of HSD I run. Get work RPC is. So they've changed things mostly in the wallet because they handle so much wallet activity. They needed to change things. So if the community decided that this is the version of the full node that everybody wants to run, they can do that. Anybody can have their own fork of HSD. GitHub is telling me right now that 180 users have forked HSD. I don't know if they've all made modifications or not, but again, like, the code is open source. You can do whatever you want with it. We can take a quick look at things like contributors. This shows the amount of commits that users have added to HSD. It's a bit deceptive. For example, Indutney didn't really contribute to HSD. He contributed to Bcoin and, back here in 2014, but he has enough commits that he's actually on the list. JJ obviously did all this work. Mark Tyneway, myself, Boy Manura, and here's Javed and Fernando Falchi is on this list. Sean Kilpatty, Raf from Namebase. So and there's Anthony from Namebase and Jackie from KyoCon. So you can kind of see, like, who the contributors are. What this list doesn't show you is, like, who can actually merge pull requests, which is JJ, myself, I think Boymanya can, and there might be one other person. For some reason, that's not public. But so if you want to, if you have a problem with HSD, you can open an issue in HSD and say that something doesn't work, And we can have discussions in HSD too. And if you want to change something in HSD, you can open a pull request. And so this is where it comes. This is an important thing about governance. Like, I'll admit I vote for president for the United States in every presidential election. I very rarely vote for my city supervisor or, like, mayor. I'm a bad community member. And when we talk about community involvement, like, it kind of comes down to that. Like, if you want to be involved, Like you gotta be involved. Like you can wait and vote for president, like wait for there's a huge issue like the block size and pick a side and then tweet about it. But there's little issues that are happening all the time, and you can be a part of that if you want to pay attention to these little issues and review pull requests, or like look at hips or come up with your own hip and like get involved. Like it's there. It's not always glamorous, like voting for president where it affects everybody, but sometimes like those little things are like the most important ways to get involved.
Yeah.
And those have come up in some community discussions before. So for example, the Handshake-web repo is the code for handshake.org. And there have been multiple proposals to remove the word experimental from the website. I think there's been 3 issues in here. And the community has discussed them. And, like this is the kind of thing where I am one of the people that can approve or deny this change. But I wouldn't do it unless there was some reasonable discussion about it. I feel like that's especially important for handshake.org, which is like the founder's website, and I don't really want to change it that much. I only recently got access to merge things to this repo. So even though my opinion about the word experimental, I think I was very clear about it, in this pull request. If there was overwhelming support from the community to take the word experimental out, I would merge it. I don't want to be a tyrant. There's no need for that. If people were like, oh, I want to take out the signature verification from HSD, it slows down my computer. Even if there was vast community support from that, like I just need to be a responsible maintainer and not merge that because it's unsafe. So, it's tough, but it's hard. I don't want there to be leaders, but there kind of are, but you don't really have to run their code. And the community discussion about the HNS Twitter, I think, was another interesting example. This is obviously
that one, I even left some comments. Not so active. I think first time I left a comment on GitHub, but yeah, that was a lot of discussion on that. About should it be active, who should be the one maintaining the handshake, because you have the HNS username, and there was a lot of discussion.
Yeah. So GitHub's telling me there were 28 participants on this issue and 66 comments. That's great. This might be the most involved community discussion we've had about something that affects the whole community, I think. And it's, it happened to take place on GitHub. It could have been a Reddit thread, I guess. It could have been a Telegram channel. GitHub is totally accessible. Nobody is like banned or blocked from accessing GitHub. Anybody can leave a comment here and they stay forever. It's not like Telegram or Discord where the messages, disappear after a while, or in Reddit where things can get buried. So I feel like even though this issue doesn't affect any code in HSD or on the actual website, it was kind of a good place to do it. And so, we have this long discussion. Some people think that the Twitter should be deleted. Some people think that it should be replaced by an AI, or like that there should be some specific rules about it, so that whoever does have access to the Twitter handle is restricted by basically a protocol where they can only tweet certain things. And then my idea was that we could open a pull request to the Handshake website with a set of rules that whoever has control over the HNS Twitter has to follow, or we would like them to follow, is the best way to say it, because you can't tell people what to do outside of the blockchain. And I think that's kind of where the discussion ended up. And I haven't made a pull request yet, and anybody still can. If you feel passionate about this, Mike, or anybody on this list, like open a pull request, take a look at this issue, or if you were involved in this issue, open a pull request to this repo that adds a file called twitter.html that explains the rules. And you can say you're allowed to retweet Kyokon and SkyInclude and HNS Fund, but you're not allowed to retweet Brantley from Ethereum. Okay, whatever. And those rules will be on there. And hopefully, we just have to hope that whoever agrees, whoever's in control of the HNS Twitter account will agree to those rules. And if the community wants to change those rules, then you can open a pull request and change them literally on that page. Hi, I'm a new Handshake company. I would like to be retweeted by HNS. Here's a pull request adding my name to the list. And then people in the community, like the kind of people I'm talking about that actually vote for mayor and city supervisor. This is it's a small thing. It's not a huge deal, but they will look at that and be like, okay, looks like you are new to the community, but your project is important enough to the community. And yes, at HNS should retweet you if your tweets follow our protocol. So, there's community governance, representation governance, and this issue is still open. I think the HNS Twitter might be pretty quiet right now because this discussion has happened. But if somebody really wants to be the champion of this, submit a pull request to this website, and that way the community can take control of this asset.
Got it. Okay, so this has been great. I know I've learned quite a few things. If I could just selfishly sneak in one, maybe it could be another video too, or I think Fauci's also has that hip too, but the wallet address is to a name. It seems like something that I don't know, I believe would be very helpful for the community. I think other naming protocols are getting users or attracting people because of the wallet address feature.
Right.
So I would like to try to support or propose that if it's already existing. I don't know if HIP2 covers that. I think that's what this is.
Yeah. So HIP2 does cover that. And let's see, I think I am Fernando. You know what? I have it in Firefox.
Yeah, I know. I've used that. I did that once on the Handshake mercenary forum. He was asking somebody to pay his address, but you have to type it in, right?
Right. So this, here is
a long skill.
Oh, he wants to download it in text edit. I don't know why it does that. Okay, there we go. So
yeah, there it is. I've seen
Fernando Fauci's Handshake address using HIP2. This is a website that is secured by Dane. So it's we don't need to talk about Dane, but it's secure. I'm certain that this address is the address that Fernando, the owner of the I Am Fernando Handshake name, wants me to send him Handshake. And then we can do the same with, I think he has a BTC address here too. Yeah. Oh, not SegWit. That's old. So we have a system of wallet naming in Handshake. The thing that is nice about this is that it's accessible with a web browser, with an HTTP request. That software everybody already has on their computer. It's very easy to integrate. It doesn't need to do DNS. It doesn't need to ask. You don't need a copy of the blockchain. It's simple. The other nice thing about this is because it's running on basically a web server, he can update this address as often as he wants. He can change it every single minute. He can change it every time somebody reloads this page. It can get updated. That's why HIP2 uses, and we discussed this, and we talked about adding addresses to text records on the blockchain, and you could do that too. You'd still need to verify DNSSEC. You need a DNS resolver to get that address out. Things about the blockchain is slow, right? Can take up to 6 hours. If you add a text record to your name on Handshake, it could take up to 6 hours for that to be resolvable. And it's a static address, it'd be hard to change, and we can do better. We don't need to argue right now about address reuse or static addresses or something like that. I believe that address reuse is not good for privacy, and we can do better with a scheme like this, better than ENS. ENS, if you want to change your address on ENS, what's it cost? It costs gas. You're not going to do it all that time. You got a static address. You apply for a job at ENS, and Brantley can look at all your trades on Uniswap because your Twitter handle is tied to your Ethereum wallet.
Yeah.
Right. So all that stuff, but that's not really what we're talking about right now. You're asking about governance, and if you want to propose something different from HIP2, you're welcome to. We can have another HIP with a different. This doesn't have to be the only way that people get walleted cryptocurrency addresses from Handshake names. It's nice to have a standard though, because then everybody can do the same thing. That's the most important thing. If we have a standard like this, then we can go out there and get Bread Wallet and Wasabi Wallet and Bob Wallet and blockchain.com and BitGo and everybody to use the same standard. ENS, Brantley's always bragging about their hundreds of wallet integrations. That's because they have a standard, how you can get from an ENS name to a wallet address. So, if you don't think this is sufficient, you're welcome to propose something. Come into the chat and we'll talk about your idea and maybe you'll convince us, maybe we'll convince you or something, or you could go to the HIPS repo and open a pull request. You don't have to do HIP2. You can write a wallet software that does, something else entirely. If you want to start a discussion about wallet naming, I'd say maybe go to the HIPS repo. Where did I have it? It's in here somewhere. Go to the HIPS repo and start a discussion here. Or you can open an issue and you can just do new issue and say like, I don't like it too, and then say I think it could be faster because Ethereum is faster, whatever. It's open and no one's gonna hate you or block you or kick you out of the network for like starting a discussion or having an idea. I talk to lots of people who aren't developers that have great ideas about Handshake, like HIP5, the whole idea of putting subdomains on Ethereum, like that's something that Mike Carson wanted, and he has some development experience, but we talk a lot, and it wasn't just Mike. A lot of people wanted to do some type of decentralized subdomains, and I helped that idea happen. I don't even think it's really necessarily a great idea using Ethereum as a decentralized name server, but I helped them write the code and bring the idea to fruition. And this is called HIP5 now, and there's a standard for it. And so what I'm saying is it's open to everybody. If you got a good enough idea, a developer will help you write it. I can help you write it. If you think HIP2 needs to be more flexible for certain use cases, like come on in and tell us what your use case is, and we can help you bring it to fruition.
Maybe there just needs to be an interface built on top, but I don't know how to, like you didn't even remember the URL to get the address from that.
Right.
I remember the I am Fernando, but I had no,
right.
Maybe it has to be an app. Somebody has to build an app, but I guess, I'm starting to use Ethereum more. I mean, I'm studying NFTs on Ethereum and, look at Twitter. Everybody's starting to update their name to ev.eth, because I had people transfer me an NFT by just saying SkyInclude.eth. I have that and it worked. And it was a small novelty, and we know, and other ones, I think a lot of people are buying these because of wallet addresses,
Right.
So,
but you don't know how, or do you? I mean, like the fact that I couldn't remember the URL.
So did you
that doesn't mean that it's a bad idea. So here's a video that Fauci made of him. I
don't think it worked
using HIP2.
I tried to do this.
Right. So this is not complete. And actually, he has a bounty here. He's offering 400 HNS. So he has the standard written. He has not integrated it into Bob Wallet yet. Apparently, he has made at least a proof of concept where I don't know why that he didn't open this as a pull request. Maybe it wasn't clean or something. But look what he's doing. He types in proof of concept. He hits enter, and the address is just there. You don't need to know how it works. You don't need to know that it's verifying Dane or DNSSEC, or that it's using HTTP instead of DNS. You don't need to know that address changes every time you request it. It just works.
Yeah, I like that.
So
it doesn't have to be a static address that like you said earlier, somebody else could just snoop in and see all my. I would agree. It's better. I could just change any address I want. I'm the owner of that name. I want it to be this address.
Right.
I like that.
The problem with HIP2 is it requires a name server, which like a lot of people who are trying to do Handshake stuff are realizing that all the cool Handshake stuff has to happen off chain. You can't put your website on Handshake. You need a web server. You can't put your subdomains on Handshake. You need a name server. And, we can talk about that more too. I think that's an important design concept for scalability and like that. But, in the future, somebody could offer, Namebase could offer could offer this, could offer HIP2 for all the names, basically in the entire blockchain. Bob Wallet could maybe even, or Kyokan could even offer, or Impervious or Mike Michelini could even offer a service where you provide name server or web server support to users to host records like this, and they'd be signed, so you wouldn't be able to manipulate them. They'd be signed by the owner. But so if you like what you saw on that proof of concept, here Fauci has offered 400 Handshake. If it's important to you, Mike, throw another 400 on there, and we'll go back to the developer community and be like, now there's an 800 HNS bounty, and we'll get done.
Got it. Okay. All right. I'm going to do that. I mean, I'm talking to other developers now about some features and stuff. I mean, I got to move it into this because I'm just talking to them privately. But yeah, I understand. Okay, this is great, Matt. I'm sure the people watching, like I mentioned, it might not be the most views, but it's definitely a targeted group of people, and I'm gonna take some action myself. So thanks again for your time today, and
sure,
I think we should do these regularly. Maybe a few more.
I'd like that. We could even cut this up and talk about the technical governance and like the social governance and stuff like that. Yeah, sorry, I get really long-winded with big topics like this. There's just so much to cover, and I feel so bad if things are left out.
It's great. No, I like it. It's good to be complete. I guess just a call to action, or we'll put this on the SkyInclude YouTube, and then I was gonna call it HIP, HIP, skyinclude.com/HIP, and then we can link to these different things. What are I have some notes, but it looks like the main one is the hsd-dev.org. It seems like that's probably the main place to go, and that links to the GitHub. But if you go there, that's kind of like, I think the main, from what I gathered, that's the main place to go for HIPs or governance.
Yeah, that's so hsd-dev.org is where you can find documentation on running HSD. But also the link to the HIPs is there, and the link to all the GitHub stuff. And github.com/handshake-org is where all the code repositories are from the founders, from this terrible centralized organization that tyrannically rules Handshake. That's where you can find their code and the discussions.
Okay, great, man. And then for you, where can people find you?
Everyone knows where to find me.
I guess
I'm on all the channels.
Okay, great. Thanks again, Matt.
Thanks so much, Mike.